Welcome to the Andy Noise Experience podcast, Endurance Noise, Random Musings. It's Monday, September 2020, about 11 o'clock here in Bakersfield, California. We can almost see blue skies. Was talking to Craig and the Jester because I'm going to go do the Thunder Ultras 100 mile this weekend up in Northern California, and we were talking air quality. And I said, well, one of the advantages of living in Bakersfield is we've always been able to see our air. And it reminded me when I took the Bakersfield Drillers, coached high school 2006 to 2009, and we went up to Mammoth one year. After first year we didn't get to go, but second year I took the varsity boys up there, and we spent 5 or 6 days. And Mammoth is where the United States track and field marathon team used to train. Meb Kefletsky was up there, and Bob Larson from UCLA was the coach, and it was a great place to train. And we're up there, and it was so funny. My son was a junior at the time. The rest of the team was seniors. We had a really good team. And I remember him saying, "Dad, I can't see the air," because there was beautiful blue skies. Unfortunately, now in the mountains, you can see the air. Speaking of pollution, we got next door. They're using their leaf blowers, which I think are illegal in California. But as you can tell, the guy is using it next door, blowing it. So unfortunately, now the mountains are smoky. That's why we had to cancel our High Sierra Trail hike because of the fires. But I saw this article on Outside Magazine talking about why altitude training helps some people but not others. And so there's always been this kind of thing about whether there are people that are responders and non-responders to all kinds of different training stimulus. And it was interesting, Johan Bernil was talking about in the Tour de France, which I've been watching lately. Really great coverage, the move with Lance and George Hincapie, and then they have Johan and the other guy together doing a more strategy related. And he was talking about how right now, you have the Slovenians in first and second, and then a bunch of Colombians, and how the Colombians obviously grew up in high altitude, but it takes them a while to get used to riding in the lower altitudes. And yeah, because the Colombians train at really, really high. Train and live at really high, like 9,000 feet. And they definitely, when they get into the Alps and Pyrenees, are definitely in their own element. So one of the things they were talking about is, what's the ideal altitude to train at, and also how does it work, or not work. And this article is kind of interesting because it says new analysis casts doubt on the idea that people are born responders or non-responders. And one of the ways they did it was they looked at a study that doesn't have anything to do with really altitude training. They took 1,000 subjects in a 3-month exercise program to see whether it would lower their blood pressure. And sure enough, the average change in the blood pressure was significant, reduced to 5 milligrams, which is good news, but not everyone benefits. And the thing about this thing was, you're thinking, wow, maybe there's some people who are super responders to exercise, and then there's other people who are not responders. But what happened was they kind of played a fast one at everybody. Not a fast one, but they said some of the stuff is called super responders saw a drop of more than 20. On the right, we have non-responders, even some negative responders whose blood pressure increased by more than 10. And the bad news in receiving might be definitely want to sign up for a genetic test. But what it was the data they were using was fictitious. It was generated by researchers to illustrate what can go wrong when you try to classify people as responders and non-responders. They took simulated blood pressure and subtracted exactly 5 milligrams from everyone's baseline. But to simulate real-world conditions, they also added some random measure error to the pre and post. For some people, their apparent baseline measurement was a little higher than its true value. For others, it was lower. Same for the final measurement. If you got a randomly low baseline and a randomly high final value, it looked like you were a non-responder, even though everyone in the simulated study was truly a responder. Makes sense. If you exercise for 3 months, something should go on. So the question of response and non-response has been a controversial topic in exercise science and in health for the last decades. Look, dimes always land on heads as long as you ignore those 5 non-responders. Researchers have realized that individual variation is as important as the average response to intervention. And that's definitely true. And this brings you back to the studies they've done on altitude training. And ever since the first Live High, Train Low protocols were devised back in the 1990s, there have been widespread belief that people are responders and other non-responders. And the author says he's lost count of the number of times he's seen second-hand altitude tents for sale on running message boards, chat boards with the note saying, "I tried it for a few months, but it turns out I'm not a responder." But as noted above, you can't actually sort responders from non-responders based from a single stint at altitude. And that's basically always the case. You can't base anything on, very little data. That's like I used to play poker full time on the internet, and you really can't determine whether you're a good player or a bad player until you play the long run. In economics, the long run can be really, really long. So, you can play hundreds of thousands of hands and be winning, but it's just because, that's statistics. But eventually, if you play long enough, good players do come out ahead. But for a long time, poor players can play pretty good. And so it says, to their credit, altitude researchers have been trying for several decades to identify the factors that predict whether you're likely to see an increase in oxygen-bearing hemoglobin, which is the main goal of altitude training for endurance athletes. But the results have been mixed at best. Still not at all clear if an athlete who responds to one altitude camp will respond to the next one. And it basically comes down, success was if you had about a 2% increase. And in the training camps that they've looked at, 46 of the 82 people had had that increase, so that's 56%. That may seem unimpressive, as I wrote earlier this year. Some scientists would argue that you've seen something similar if you simply sent the athletes to a super focused training camp at sea level, no altitude. But if you assume the altitude works, then you're left with two possibilities. Either some athletes aren't wired to respond to altitude, or half of them were doing something wrong. And so they looked at it, and they said, to address the first thing, they looked at people who had been to the training camps for more than twice, and they showed that did those who benefited once consistently benefit again. Here are the individual results for the 15 athletes, and 4 of the athletes always benefited. 2 of them always saw neutral or negative, and for the other 9, it was a mixed bag. So what determines whether you're going to have a successful camp? One solid finding was the success rate jumped to 65% when the altitude was 6,500 feet, or for the rest of the world, 2,000 meters. And that's actually kind of a little bit on the low side. It's interesting here in the United States how many of our athletes are like training at Flagstaff, which is over 7,000. Boulder's probably around there, but definitely it seems like a lot of people want to be living at like 8 or 9. I know Mammoth is 8 or 9,000. And it says that the physiologists had 2 other pieces of advice for coaches. So you want to be about 6,500 feet, and then you don't want to have your athletes come up there, in poor shape. Basically, poor shape to get better would be having low iron stores, because you want red blood cells. The reason they're red is the iron in them. You need iron. And so if you go up there with your iron stores low, how are you going to build blood cells if you can't, if you don't have any iron in your body? And that's kind of what happened to me back in 2016 when I got to my lightest. I went full hardcore vegan for like a year, and my times dropped because I was lighter. Good old F equals MA. I got down to 225 and was doing a 219 half. But after a year on the diet, and it's nothing wrong with the diet perhaps, but it's just more me not knowing what I'm doing and not having the knowledge to get a really good diet. But the following summer, I'd go hiking in the mountains with my friend who just texted me, Sarah, and who has the High Sierra Trail, and I couldn't climb. And I just chalked it up to that I didn't have any red blood cells. Whatever I was eating was just not providing me the nutrients to build, the red blood cells. And so they say you definitely want to have your athletes come prepared with iron stores proper, and also they needed to have, not be inflamed. So it says these rules were not enforced, some researchers. So, you definitely want to go up there and ready to go. And it says other studies, in contrast, have found that having good iron levels and avoiding illness are crucial to getting good results from the altitude camp. Of course, that's probably a good way to get good results anytime, is to train, eating healthy, getting in proper sleep, and having a proper diet so that your body can recover from the workouts, work the workouts, but also can build from the workouts. So if you're missing stuff. So again, like almost everything we talk about here, the real conclusion yet again is getting the most bang of your altitude buck is complicated and highly individual. But you can look at it as half empty, simply booking a plane guarantees nothing, or you can take it as a glass half full, and even if your first stint doesn't work, you might still be able to make it work next time if you get the details right. And I look at my own experience back in 2009. I really got kind of back into hiking, saw a group of people out hiking around Bakersfield, asked them what they were doing. They said, hey, we're going to Whitney at the end of the summer. First, I just said, let me train with you. I didn't really have any interest in doing Whitney, but ultimately I went up there, and I'll tell you, the altitude after about 10,000 feet was just killing me. And maybe one of the things I think with altitude is the mental game and preparation and learning pacing and hydration and nutrition. So now every summer I go up, I'm better and better, to the point where back then I get 10, 11,000 feet. I could take 10 steps and have to stop. Now I can just hike along, but I go nice and easy and slow, stay within myself. And it's just kind of learning how to take care of myself up there. So it's not just a physical, it's also a mental type of issue. So this article will be in the show notes, as always. Definitely please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And as always, stay healthy, be boring, not epic.